halfway between London and Oxford, in the little village of West Wycombe, there's a hill. And beneath this hill, there's a man-made cave. It was dug by labourers in 1740. It was funded by colonial plunder. The caves stretch for a quarter of a mile. They have a straight entrance with a winding descent that leads you to a narrow bridge that crosses over an underground stream they named Styx. This leads you to the inner temple where the walls drip with chalk. The basement breather who commissioned this labour that used British labour to dig a bunker under Buckinghamshire was Sir Francis Dashwood. He was from West Wycombe and educated at Eton, and he served as Chancellor of the Exchequer at the peak of the British Empire during the 7 Years' War. While he was in office, Britain seized Bengal, and his close circle of friends included Robert Clive and East India Company directors. The amount of British manpower that went into digging his cave is insane. He told the public that they had to dig out caves to provide stone for road building. That gave the project legitimacy. But the caves were dug far deeper and far larger than any roadworks needed. Being able to get British labourers to dig him a cave was a statement of his power to other colonial governors. Dashwood showed elite peerage that he could reshape British landscape on a whim, pay off the poor to dig it for him, and create a private underground temple for occult ritual without any question. Dashwood was a socialite. He didn't just throw parties, he built cults. In 1734, he co-founded the Society of Dilettanti, who claimed to be sponsoring archaeological digs in Greece and Italy, but were famous for their heavy drinking, sexual exploitation, and mock religious rituals. The role of this space was cultural imperialism. They would appropriate classic symbols and twist them into sexual theatre, asserting British dominance over traditional markers of power. In these caves, the Old Boys Club performed mock religious ceremonies. They parodied mass and committed blasphemy. There was heavy drinking, orgies, and prostitutes arranged for rituals. This is how the British Empire networked. They performed satirical inversions of Christian worship, and membership was limited to aristocrats and MPs. It was a secluded zone where the normal rules of society, law, morality, they were suspended for the powerful. But it wasn't just indulgence. These parties were deliberately boundary breaking to bind attendants together. Power networks are bound by secrecy and complicity. Jeffrey Epstein operated inside of a tradition. Secrecy itself was the weapon. Once inside, they were bound together by mutual risk. Mocking the church privately, when so much of the empire relied on it publicly, proved their impunity. They could do in this cave what ordinary people would go to jail for. Same as Epstein's Island, powerful men behaving in ways that they shouldn't because they believe that they are above consequence. And if you can convince a load of working class labourers to dig you a sex cult cave, you're gonna feel like you're above consequence. Same administration that starved 3 million Bengalis would force prostitutes to dress like nuns in these caves for ritual. Trigger warning: some of the exposed ritual abuse allegations from these networks have included anal rape, consuming menstrual blood and urine, and using scarlet women as ritual objects. Testimonies describe the systematic grooming of minors, including coercion into sex acts with much older men, often in groups or in ceremonial contexts. Survivors have spoken about being made to participate in humiliating and degrading sexual acts that go far beyond ordinary sexual abuse. This isn't just rich men being perverts. It was an inversion of the moral and social order that the public believed they upheld. They mocked religion, they corrupted childhood, and they shattered taboos. This is ritualized domination. Sex here is not for pleasure. It's proof of power. We can do this because no one can stop us. It's a symbol of control. Even the most vile and depraved acts were given impunity by the British Empire. The early 1700s are important in British Empire history. 1707 was the union between England and Scotland. It marked the expansion into India and the Caribbean. Enormous amounts of wealth were flowing into London from slavery. Members of this club were MPs, aristocrats, and future prime ministers. Sexual tourism and paedophilia flourished in colonial outposts. These men had access to money and property and the legal shield of their class. There are accounts in contemporary letters from members that vulnerable bodies were specifically brought in. So people with physical impairments, desperate, slaves, poor, prostitutes, and their vulnerability was the kick. Exotic license became a perk of colonial service. When British elites went abroad, such as East India Company officers, they were given exotic license, which meant that outside Britain's borders, these creeps could indulge in seriously deprived social behaviours that would be criminal or scandal at home. Officers were expected to enjoy this as a privilege. They were encouraged to enjoy it, brag about it, and bring back stories that reinforced their elite masculinity. What began in the colonies quickly came back home, and they built caves and abbeys to feed this newly acquired appetite. The empire abroad had no accountability. Colonial officers knew that they could do whatever they liked in Kenya or India or Malaysia. And behind closed doors in Britain, the same pattern turned inward. Because once you've overseen a massacre or starved an entire province, ordinary vices aren't enough. And so they escalate to the unspeakable. Upper class and public school culture trained these Oxford boys to seek status through cruelty and humiliation. And they used twisted Orientalism and cherry-picked framing of classic texts to project philosophical justification. This isn't sick, it's initiation, it's magic. If you look at the British Empire as only trade and war and governance, you miss half the picture. It was also an engine of perverse desire, training its ruling class to enjoy domination just for the sake of it. And that appetite, once normalised, didn't stop when the Union Jack came down. It just folded into the city, into Oxford clubs, into intelligence networks and private islands. The faces changed, the costumes changed, but the ritual is the same. When power thinks it's untouchable, it turns into this, and it has never stopped.